Did you know that a man who once sifted through garbage dumps to survive crossed the finish line of an international marathon, cheered by thousands? This is the story of Carlos A. year-old Colombian, whose life proves that the human spirit can rise from the ashes of despair to achieve the impossible. Carlos was born in a crumbling shack on the outskirts of where the air smelled of rotting fruit and diesel fumes. The year was 1987, and his mother, Rosa, worked as a street vendor, selling tamales to feed her 3 children. His father, Miguel, was a ghost gone before Carlos could form a memory of him. The family lived in Ciudad, a sprawling slum where hope was as scarce as clean water. As a boy, Carlos learned to navigate the city's underbelly. By age 10, he was scavenging through trash heaps, collecting bottles and scraps of metal to sell for pennies. His small hands, calloused and stained, moved quickly through the refuse, dodging rats and broken glass. "You have to be fast," his older brother Javier told him. "The good stuff doesn't wait." Carlos listened, but he hated it. The other kids at school, if he made it to class, called him Bocerero, trash boy. The nickname stuck like gum to a shoe. School was a luxury Carlos couldn't afford for long. By 13, he dropped out to work full-time. The streets became his classroom, teaching him lessons no textbook could. How to spot a recyclable worth a peso. How to avoid the gangs that prowled at dusk. How to ignore the gnawing hunger in his gut. Rosa tried to shield him, but she was fighting her own battles: arthritis and debt. Javier, meanwhile, drifted into trouble running errands for a local dealer. Carlos felt the weight of his family's struggles, but he was too young to carry it. One night, when Carlos was 15, Javier didn't come home. Rosa wept as the police delivered the news. Javier had been shot in a botched deal. The loss shattered the family. Rosa withdrew, her tamale cart gathering dust. Carlos, now the man of the house, doubled his hours in the dumps. Grief clung to him like damp clothes, and he found solace in the only escape he could afford: cheap liquor and glue-sniffing with other street kids. By 17, Carlos was an addict, his dreams buried under layers of filth and despair. Addiction is a thief, stealing time and dignity. For Carlos, it stole years. He drifted through his 20s, a ghost in his own life. He'd wake in alleys, his head pounding, his pockets empty. Rosa, now frail, begged him to stop. "You're all I have left," she'd whisper, her eyes wet. But Carlos couldn't hear her over the siren call of his next hit. The dumps were his world now, a labyrinth of waste where he felt at home. He was invisible, just another shadow among the heaps. The turning point came on a humid morning in 2013, when Carlos was 30. He was rummaging through a landfill in USM, a district notorious for its stench and violence. His hands shook from withdrawal and his vision blurred. As he bent to pick up a plastic bottle, he collapsed, his body betraying him. He lay there, staring at the sky, the buzz of flies filling his ears. For the first time, he thought he might die in it in a dramatic blaze, but quietly forgotten among the trash. A voice broke through the haze. "Oi, hombre, you okay?" It was Luis, a fellow trash picker, older and weathered but kind. Luis dragged Carlos to a nearby clinic, where a nurse pumped him with fluids and stern words. "You're killing yourself," she said. "You're not garbage. Stop living like you are." Her words stung, but they lodged in his mind like a splinter. Luis became an unlikely ally. He'd been clean for a decade and saw something in Carlos, a flicker of fight. "You need a reason to live," Luis told him one day, tossing him a pair of worn sneakers. "Try running, it's free and it hurts less than glue." Carlos laughed it off, but Luis was persistent. He'd show up at dawn, banging on the door of Carlos's shack. "Venga, let's go." Just 1 kilometer. Running was torture at first. Carlos's lungs burned, his legs wobbled, and his body screamed for a fix. But Luis was relentless, pacing him through the muddy streets of Ciudad. "Breathe, hombre, 1 step at a time, slowly." Carlos noticed a change. Running cleared his head, if only for a moment. The rhythm of his feet drowned out the noise of his cravings. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Quitting wasn't easy. Addiction clawed at Carlos, and relapses were frequent, but running gave him a lifeline. He started small, jogging a few blocks each morning. The neighbors noticed, whispering as he passed, "Look at the bucerero," thinking he's an athlete. Carlos ignored them. He wasn't running for their approval. He was running for himself. Rosa noticed the change too. Her son was eating again, his eyes less hollow. She began saving coins to buy him rice and beans, determined to fuel his new obsession. "You're stronger than you know," she told him one evening, her voice steady for the first time in years. Carlos clung to her words, using them to silence the doubts that crept in at night. By 2015, Carlos was sober, though he didn't trust himself to stay that way. Running became his anchor. He joined a local running group, a ragtag crew of dreamers who trained on the city's cracked sidewalks. The group's leader, Sofia, was a former social worker who believed in second chances. "You've got heart," she told Carlos, after he finished a 5K race, his first. He placed last, but the medal around his neck felt like gold. Sofia introduced him to structure: stretching, pacing, hydration. She also taught him to dream bigger. "Why not a marathon?" she asked one day, her eyes gleaming. Carlos scoffed. Marathons were for elites, not trash pickers. But Sofia was undeterred. She showed him videos of runners from humble backgrounds, Kenyans who trained barefoot, Mexicans who outran poverty. "They're not so different from you," she said. The idea took root. Carlos began training harder, waking at 4 a.m. to run before his shift at the dump. He couldn't afford proper gear, so he taped his sneakers to keep them together. Nutrition was another hurdle. He survived on rice, plantains, and whatever protein Rosa could scrape together. But he was determined. Each mile he ran felt like a step away from his old life. In 2017, Carlos set his sights on the half marathon, a grueling 21-kilometer race through the city's hilly streets. He trained for months, pushing his body to its limits. The dumps were still his livelihood, but running was his purpose. He'd jog home after a 12-hour shift, his legs heavy, but his spirit light. Rosa, now his biggest cheerleader, sewed him a makeshift running shirt from old fabric scraps. Race day was chaos. Thousands of runners crowded the starting line, their sleek gear a stark contrast to Carlos's patched-up outfit. He felt out of place, but Sofia's voice echoed in his head. "You belong here." When the gun went off, he ran, his heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. The course was brutal steep climbs, thin air, and a relentless sun. By kilometer 15, his legs screamed for mercy. But he thought of Rosa, of Javier, of the boy who'd been called Basurero. He kept going. Carlos crossed the finish line in 3 hours and 12 minutes. Not fast, but he finished. The crowd roared, and Rosa, waiting with Sofia, wept as she hugged him. "Me," she whispered. For Carlos, it was more than a race. It was proof he could rewrite his story. The half-marathon lit a fire in him. He wanted more. In 2019, Sofia helped him apply for a spot in the New York City Marathon, one of the world's most prestigious races. The application was a long shot. Carlos had no money, no passport. No way to get to the U.S., but Sofia rallied the running group, and they crowdfunded his trip, peso by peso. A local charity chipped in for his visa, and a shoe store donated a pair of real running sneakers. Carlos was overwhelmed. "Why me?" he asked Sofia. "Because you're a story worth telling," she replied. November 3rd, 2019, was the coldest day Carlos had ever felt. New York City buzzed with marathon fever, its streets lined with 50,000 runners and millions of spectators. Carlos stood at the starting line on Staten Island, his breath visible in the crisp air. His new sneakers felt foreign, but they were a reminder of the community that believed in him. He wore a small Colombian flag pinned to his shirt, a nod to Rosa and his roots. The race was unlike anything he'd imagined. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge stretched before him, a daunting climb. The crowds in Brooklyn roared, their energy carrying him forward. By mile 10, his body ached, but he thought of the dumps, of the days he'd crawled through trash to survive. This pain was nothing compared to that. Manhattan was a blur of skyscrapers and noise. At mile 18, the infamous wall hit. His legs felt like lead, and doubt crept in. "You're nobody," a voice whispered. But then he heard a shout. "Venga, Colombia." A group of spectators waved a Colombian flag, their cheers piercing the fog of fatigue. Carlos gritted his teeth and pushed on. Central Park was the final test, its rolling hills a cruel twist. But as he neared the finish line, he saw the clock. 4 hours, 28 minutes. It's not a record, but a miracle for a man who'd once collapsed in a landfill. He crossed the line, arms raised, tears streaming down his face. The crowd's roar was deafening, but all he could hear was Rosa's voice in his head. Me. Carlos returned to a hero, at least in Suteth. Local papers ran his story, calling him El Corredor de la Basura, the trash runner. He hated the nickname, but it brought attention to his community. With Sofia's help, he started a running club for kids in the slums, teaching them what Luis had taught him, that running is free and it can save you. Today, Carlos still works in the dumps, though he dreams of coaching full-time. He runs every morning, his patched sneakers replaced by donations from supporters. Rosa, now in her 60s, watches him with pride, her tamale cart back in business. "You showed me how to live again," she told him once, and he knew it was mutual. Carlos's story isn't just about a marathon. It's about the power of one step, one choice, to change everything. He's not a celebrity or a saint, just a man who refused to let his past define him. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. What did you think of Carlos's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, or tell us. What story of transformation do you want to hear next?